On that completely illogical, wildly understeering bombshell. On that bombshell. On that bombshell. And on that bombshell. On that blue-rinsed bombshell. And on that bombshell. On that alluringly Teutonic bombshell. And on that bombshell. And on that rather sad bombshell. And on that bombshell. And on that bombshell.
And on that bombshell.
And on that Obama shell. And on that bombshell.
And on that bombshell.
And on that unusually harmonious bombshell. And on that bombshell. And on that bombshell. On that bombshell.
现在已经到 bombshell 结束。
And on that bombshell. On those two bombshells. And on that potential bombshell. And now look.
Disaster.
It's a bombshell. And on that bombshell.
Thank you for watching.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for watching. And, well, goodbye.
Goodbye.
And with this sign-off, the Hammond, Clarkson and May era of Top Gear was over. But what led us here? Let's go back to the incident known as the Fracas. Now before I get on with the video, I'd like to say that if you want to see the original version of this video and my other videos without any of the YouTube copyright fuckery, then please head over to the Patreon. For just $3 a month, you get to see the videos as they're originally intended, without any freezes or any music changes. You also get early access to the videos and you get to see my top 11 porn stars in politics video, which I think is pretty class. So yeah, links in the description. If you could, it would really help me pay the rent and stop me from having to create an OnlyFans. So for mine and everyone else's sake, please sign up to the Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Let's go back to March of 2015. Not for the purposes of this video, I mean actually let's go back then. We're still part of the EU then. Better times, better times. Back on the 4th of March, when the Top Gear team was staying in Simonstone Hall in the Yorkshire Dales, Oisin Timon was put in charge of catering, and was therefore the target of Jeremy Clarkson's anger when he couldn't get a hot meal. When Oisin informed Clarkson that he couldn't get any hot food, on the patio of the hotel, Clarkson proceeded to verbally abuse him, calling him a lazy Irish cunt, and then physically assaulting him by punching him in the face.
What did he punch a producer? They pulled the show.
Well, I know a little bit about that. So we had a Velociraptor Raptor truck that we were up in Canada with these guys. So this has been back in into 2014, and so like I'm working with the producers, and they're like, you know, when you're around the talent, you know, don't talk to them, don't spend time around them. I'm like, I'm around famous people more than these guys. These guys are a lot more famous. I mean, I don't care that they're a big deal. So anyway, so the producer's kind of being a dick. Well, that producer, I won't say his name, but that producer that was being a massive dick, and maybe he was just doing his job, like 2 weeks later, they're somewhere else in there in England, and Jeremy, you know, Jeremy gets a little bit of a temper, and these guys work long hours, and maybe they hadn't eaten, and the producer guy was fucking with him, and Jeremy fucking whacked the guy, and I'm like, I wanted to fucking punch that guy a couple times too.
The whole incident lasted 30 seconds. However, Clarkson continued to verbally berate Oisin and other members of the Top Gear team for a further 20 minutes. He was doing it so loud that he could be heard in the dining room and a hotel bedroom. Which I don't know how loud that is, as I've not been to the hotel. Don't know how far away those places were. Clarkson shouted expletives and threatened to sack Oisin, who was reported to be distressed, and ended up driving himself to A&E. I don't know if he used any of the lads' ambulances from a previous challenge. Needless to say, this was not good. In the following days, Clarkson tried to apologise to Oisin by text, email and in person. He knocked on his door, but Oisin wasn't answering. Apparently, the two have subsequently patched things up. Oisin didn't report the incident to the BBC, but 5 days later, or 6 days according to Top Gear Wiki, that doesn't really matter. A few days later, after being pressured by other senior members of the production team, Jeremy Clarkson reported it to the BBC himself. Clarkson called Danny Cohen to apologise in an attempt to avoid an inquiry. However, Danny said he had no option but to suspend him and suspend the remaining 3 episodes of the series. So on the 10th of March, he was immediately suspended and Top Gear was put on hiatus, after May and Hammond refused to film without Jeremy.
Top Gear's Jeremy Clarkson returning home to waiting photographers after his suspension by the BBC for what they have called a fracas.
Today, the long-standing Top Gear host was suspended. The BBC confirming the news in a brief statement, saying, "Following a fracas with a BBC producer, Jeremy Clarkson has been suspended pending an investigation. No one else has been suspended. Top Gear will not be broadcast this Sunday."
You, Evan, and you seem like a mild-mannered individual. I can't imagine you getting one of your lovely professional producers and punching them for anything, let alone if your supper was late. If you did, the very least you would expect is to be kicked out of your job and possibly have the police involved.
While Clarkson had many detractors, he also had many supporters too, like Prime Minister David Cameron, who threw his support behind Clarkson the next day. He also had support among the Top Gear fans, who signed a 1 million-strong petition to get the BBC to reinstate Clarkson. On the 20th of March, the petition was delivered by tank to the BBC's broadcasting house in central London. They went full-on DX.
1 million people want him installed back on the air. It's the numbers speak for themselves. Look, we're not going to get into defending him, but people love him and they want to see him on the BBC on Sunday night. So stop all this, stop winding up your viewers and put him back on the telly.
By the 20th of March, the investigation had been wrapped up, and while no decision had been announced, it seemed Clarkson knew his fate, which was indicated by a sweary anti-BBC rant that he delivered at a charity auction.
To be in the audience of Top Gear, it was an 18-year waiting list. You know, the BBC's themselves, and so who gives a but it was a great show, and they up. So
Top Gear made $67 million a year for the BBC, and the show was still getting above $5 million a week. The BBC would get a taste of what life would be like after Top Gear, when on the 15th of March, instead of airing a new Top Gear episode, they aired a documentary about the Red Arrows, and attracted just 1 million viewers, a fraction of what the Top Gear audience would have been.
The Top Gear over the years has generated hundreds of millions of pounds for the BBC. Jeremy Clarkson is the figurehead of that programme. He is Top Gear. It looks as if this time he may have gone too far. If Top Gear loses Jeremy Clarkson, it will plunge it into a world of trouble.
Then, on the 25th of March 2014, after a 15-day investigation led by BBC Scotland head Ken Macquarie, the BBC's Director General Tony Hall announced in a video statement that Jeremy Clarkson had been sacked.
Physical violence accompanied by prolonged verbal abuse has crossed the line. And that's why, with regret, I decided this morning that we will not be renewing Jeremy's contract.
So what now for the future of Top Gear? The main star and creative voice behind the show was gone. The BBC needed to keep the show, and they needed to keep as many of the Top Gear team as they could. Well, sadly for the BBC, on the 26th of March, the day after Clarkson's sacking was announced, James May, Andy Willman and Clarkson arranged a secret meeting. James also changed his Twitter bio to former TV presenter, and he would also give an excellent interview on his doorstep and offer the press beverages. What a lovely geezer. However, the BBC's concerns laid far beyond just business, as on the same day Tony Hall announced Jeremy Clarkson's sacking, he received a death threat, and him and his wife needed to be placed under 24-hour guards outside his house in Oxfordshire. What did his wife do? She didn't sack Jeremy, leave her out of this. On the 30th of March, Andy Willman wrote an email to the 113-strong Top Gear team. It got leaked to the press, so Willman had to deny that it was a resignation. But it was pretty clear to everyone that, yeah, it pretty much was. Everyone knew that May and Hammond were leaving. The BBC proposed having the Have I Got News For You, Never Mind the Buzzcocks idea of having the host change every show. But it was not to be. March would see May and Hammond's contracts expire, and in April they confirmed that they would not return to Top Gear. Soon after, Andy Willman also confirmed that he would be quitting the show. Now by this point, Top Gear wasn't just a TV show, it was a national institution. And just like with other national institutions, regardless of whether the best people for the job are running it or not, the institution will continue. So there seemed to be very little thought that Top Gear would actually be scrapped. So the BBC had the task of what to do with one of its flagship shows. Now I think the BBC honestly thought that Hammond and May would actually stay to present the show. They might have thought that the three actually hated each other like you see on TV. In an attempt to try and get them to stay, the BBC opened their checkbooks. Hammond and May, who were at the time on £500,000 a year at the BBC, were offered £4.6 million to stay. This would see them earn £1.15 million a year. I don't really know how those maths work out. Maybe they had some mad bonuses, like, you know, if one of them managed to win the Ballon d'Or, they'd get extra money. I don't know. In spite of how lucrative the offer was, they put geese before peas and turned it down. So who would be the new hosts? Many names were in the frame, such as Dan Walker, Jodie Kidd, Vicky Butler-Henderson, Susie Perry, John Bishop, Johnny Vaughan. Sue Perkins was the bookie's favourite until she received death threats and hate on Twitter, so she had to rule herself out. Come on people, no need for that. Stop with the death threats. After she ruled herself out, Philip Glenister was the bookie's favourite. You know, he did that Top Gear Children in Need thing, kinda makes sense. With bookies also offering odds on Dermot O'Leary, Steve Coogan and Stephen Fry. Mike Brewer claims that he was offered the job but turned it down, and apparently so did Steve Coogan, but I've not been able to verify this. One name who instantly ruled himself out as soon as Clarkson got sacked was Chris Evans. He was in fact mates with the three presenters, and he appeared several times on the show over the years. He immediately ruled himself out as he didn't want to be a pawn in the contract negotiations between May, Hammond and the BBC. So when James and Richard declared that they weren't going to re-sign with the BBC, on the 16th of June it was announced that Chris Evans would be the new Top Gear presenter. Chris asked for the approval of May, Hammond, Clarkson and Willman, who all gave it to him. Well, I don't know if Willman did because he didn't respond, but 3 out of the 4 will do. Clarkson claimed that before Evans was offered the job, someone at the BBC asked Clarkson to return to the show. However, Clarkson rejected the offer. The BBC have denied this. So Chris Evans would be the new face of Top Gear.
Your reaction to this? Do you think Chris Evans can do a good job?
Yeah, I do. I think he's the perfect choice. I was always a really big fan of Jeremy's, but he's gone. Who was going to fill the position? I don't think many people could take that, but Chris can.
So Chris Evans, he was a veteran presenter of TV and radio. who in the 2000s was the highest paid entertainer in the UK. He was also at one time one of the most well-known and well-loved presenters as the host of The Big Breakfast, TFI Friday, and some other bollocks about a toothbrush. He was married to Carol McGriffin and Billy Piper, and then some other geezer who isn't famous, so I didn't bother to learn her name. He was a successful businessman who loved cars and at one point loved drugs. He was great in Captain America, and he was a respected TV presenter who loved to break rules and get in controversy. Combine that with the fact that he was a massive petrol head, he'd been on the show multiple times and got the approval of the Top Gear trio, and he seemed like the perfect man for the job. He was signed to a 3-year deal, netting him £5 million, making him the highest paid presenter at the BBC. However, he wouldn't just be a presenter, as he was also given the role of executive producer. So it seems the BBC wanted someone to step into Jeremy's shoes directly, to front the show and drive its creative. He'd successfully performed this role on the shows that he'd worked on in the past, so it wasn't an unfamiliar position for him. However good Chris's qualifications may have looked like on paper, it will always be hard to replace an integral figurehead with a long reign of success in a role. It would be like trying to follow Ferguson at United, Wenger at Arsenal, Klopp at, well actually no, we managed to move on from Klopp quite well, but Shankly, we managed to plan Shankly's leaving quite well as well. Paisley, it'd be like trying to follow Bob Paisley. Actually no, we were quite successful after Bob Paisley as well. Actually Liverpool were pretty good at succession planning, but us aside, Chris Evans was stepping into an exciting but perilous position.
People have been saying to me, you must be so excited. Excitement was the furthest emotion from my tummy.
News of Evans' appointment was actually a lot more positive than I remember, as the fans' reaction was mixed. Some thought it'd be alright and were optimistic, and others had more sense. On his breakfast show, he asked for tips on how to make the show better, and he announced that they'd hold open auditions for new presenters. Anyone could apply, you didn't even need to be famous. And while that sounds just like another bit of PR bollocks, he actually followed through on this and held screen tests with a few of the people who sent videos in. Not mine, admittedly, but never mind, I'm not bitter. Some were actually looking forward to Top Gear's future. But what would the future of Top Gear look like? Fuck knows. While on 5 Live, the same day that Evans got the job, he said there would 100% be a female stig. A day later, BBC Two controller Kim Sillinger denied this, but said there would be more fan participation, even saying fans could take part in the star in the reasonably priced car segment. I mean, there wouldn't be stars then, so it sort of defeats the point, but never mind, it didn't happen anyway. It would have been class actually, I would have liked to have taken part. Can't drive, but you know, it would have been nice. In further interviews, Chris Evans did say that there would definitely be a female on the show, which back then caused headlines. Today, probably the fact that all the hosts wouldn't be females would be the headline, but back then, in 2015, this was some shocking news. But before Top Gear could step into its uncertain future, there were still some commitments from its past that they needed to honour, as tickets to the Top Gear Live tour had already been bought and sold. Well, I mean, you put them on sale first before people buy them. That doesn't matter. The trio were allowed to carry out the tour under the name Clarkson, Hammond and May Live, because you know, that's their names. And on the 28th of June 2015, we would officially wave goodbye to the Clarkson, Hammond and May era with the final episode of Series 22.
Hello and welcome to what's left of Top Gear. And tonight's programme is not, as I'm sure you've guessed, a normal one.
The remaining footage for this series would be cut together into a 72-minute episode, which would see Richard and James, who's wearing a lovely jacket, by the way. Oh, looking nice, mate. They would be presenting in an empty Top Gear studio. Richard would do Jeremy's customary opening voiceover, which didn't actually sound as surreal as I thought it would do.
James falls out of a boat. I have a fight with a gear lever. And... hello. Oh dear, this is a bit embarrassing.
The studio would be fitted with a 10-foot plastic elephant called Jeremy as a reference to, you know, the elephant in the room. The episode saw the trio become classic car owners as they were set the task of buying a classic convertible perfect for the English countryside. This was great. The guys were also set the task of buying an SUV and were then set a series of challenges.
Come on, no, don't! I hate working on Top Gear!
Well, that's fortunate, geezer. This challenge was predictably fantastic. A sad reminder of what we would now be missing.
Isn't Jeremy fat? Sorry, sir. I don't mean that's not necessarily bad, obviously. Some people just are.
Some of the other things intended to be in the series, which we didn't get to see, were Jeremy testing a trio of limousines. And apparently the remaining star and reasonably priced car guests would be Gary Lineker, Henry Cavill and Keanu Reeves. Oh, if I was all round there. Following their departure from the show, Clarkson, Hammond, May and Willman were now all up for grabs. ITV held secret meetings with the team, however they couldn't attract them to a deal. They were rumoured to be working with Netflix on a new show that would have the title House of Cars. Like it, like the pun. However, they ended up signing a free series deal with streaming rivals Amazon. This deal was apparently for £160 million, which also included solo programmes with each of them. Now, this exact number of 160 million has been disputed, but nevertheless it was still a lot of money, and the main point was that the team were now on bigger salaries and working with a bigger budget, so they actually made out of this deal pretty good. There's a lesson for you kids. Want to get ahead in life? Punch your co-worker. To make things worse for the BBC, they were not only without the much loved on-screen talent, but also a lot of the crew left to join them at Amazon as well. So the BBC really had an exhaustive and daunting bit of staffing to do. They had what they hoped to be their Clarkson replacement, but could they get someone to replace Willman? In July, Lisa Clark was announced as the new executive producer for the show. She, like Chris, was a successful TV veteran who had worked with Chris on The Big Breakfast and Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. And she'd also been a senior commissioning executive at the BBC and set up a production company called Pet Productions with Bob Mortimer and Vic Reeves. I can't imagine that office life would have been peaceful. So this looked like a good appointment. Now they needed to complete the presenter lineup. And you'd think the chance to be on one of the world's most popular programmes would be something people would all kick, push and outfuck their way to get onto. I mean, I know I would certainly trade sexual favours for the opportunity. However, I think everyone was aware that no matter how talented or well liked the trio of people you get to replace Clarkson, May and Hammond, it's very unlikely to work. Those three were Top Gear. Those three were the perfect trio for that show. Also, the schedule of being a Top Gear presenter was very hectic. Both of these factors would be reflected in the amount of presenters turning down offers and ruling themselves out from presenting the show. Jodie Kidd, the race driver, model, former star in a reasonably priced car track leader, and at the time presenter on the Classic Car Show, was approached about being on Top Gear, but she said, nah, not for me. Radio presenter Zoe Ball also ruled herself out. Susie Perry, who, as I previously mentioned, had apparently turned it down all the way back in the day. Fuck me, it was episode 2 I mentioned that in. Oh, been doing this series for a long time. Cheers for sticking with me, if you've watched this far. And please like and subscribe. I've gone grey since I've started doing this. Susie Perry, once again, said she wasn't interested. In October, the famous ex-motorcycle driver turned presenter Guy Martin also turned them down. So the search went on. The audition process apparently took 12 weeks, and on the 7th of September a screen test was conducted at the Dunsfold Aerodrome, which was split into 2 sections. An in-studio walk-around summary of the Volkswagen Golf GTI, for which half would be scripted and the other half the presenter would have to come up with themselves. They also would have to do this without an auto cue. The second section was a road test of the Mercedes AMG C63 estate. 2 people who attended the screen test were For the Love of Cars presenter Anne Anstead. However, he was ultimately unsuccessful after he crashed the Mercedes into a tyre wall. But look at those arms. Oh, he could crash into my tyre wall anytime, if I was. The other was long-running 5th Gear presenter Johnny Smith, who attended the screen test but was unsuccessful. Now originally there was planned to be a chemistry test with Chris Evans, however that was cancelled. But you know, I don't imagine that'll be that important, it'll probably go fine. In October, Chris Evans attended the annual trade show MIPCOM in Cannes, where he and the Stig gave a sneak peek into what this new Top Gear would be like. And he basically said fuck all. Probably just wanted a free trip to Cannes. I mean, can't really blame me, geezer, I'd have done the same thing. One notable thing he did say was that the new Top Gear team might not have a trio of presenters at all. He in fact said, they're the Three Stooges, they are the Bee Gees, they are that and I'm not. I'm me, I'm a solo artist at the moment, I'm on my own, so do I form a band or not? He very much gave the impression that this would be his show, he would be the main focus. In November, it was announced Top Gear would air on the 8th of May 2016 and would consist of 16 episodes, making it the longest Top Gear series to date. Filming for the series was already underway, so things seemed to be progressing well. However, in late December, Lisa Clark, the co-executive producer, left the show. The BBC was quick to stress that this was a mutual decision and that there was no ill feeling between Clark and Evans. Wonder why the BBC is making such a point to say that. Now the BBC needed someone to fill Lisa's role at the helm of the show. I reckon give it to Hodgson to the end of the season, but never mind. They decided to promote internally and give it to series editor Alex Renton for the time being. This role would end up being a permanent one. So good on you, Alex. The next day, on the 23rd of December, news leaked of 2 more presenters who would be on the show, Sabine Smits and Chris Harris. And these were 2 pretty good appointments. Sabine Smits, as previously mentioned on part 2 and 3, had been on the show multiple times. She was a well-respected racing driver, donned the Queen of the Nürburgring. Yeah, see geezer, I pronounced it correctly, I think. She had charisma, she had charm, she could banter back and forth with the original Top Gear team. She was already a seasoned presenter on the German motor show D-Motor.
You're cheaper than he is. You're much better looking than he is. You're quicker than he is. And yeah, exactly. So you're taller. Yes. And you speak better English.
What more of an appraisal do you need? Chris Harris was also a former racing driver who was an automotive journalist who, like James May, worked at Autocar. And like James May, he got in trouble. While he was there, he was banned from driving Ferraris and Lamborghinis. He had presenting experience from doing multiple YouTube channels, he'd won a few tag titles in TNA, he was a good appointment. He in fact had been in the automotive world for so long that he actually auditioned for Driven back in the day, and like Richard Hammond, he was unsuccessful. This was about to be a similar story, as he was initially turned down by Top Gear. He then went on to work on some other projects, and the BBC went and offered him the job. They then went back to him after that and reduced the number of episodes that he would appear on. Just another indication of the behind the scenes chaos that was happening at Top Gear.
It's been a strange old process. It was always going to be awful. I wrote an article on Jalopnik the week after the last Top Gear kind of finished when they left, saying anyone that takes this job is an idiot.
Yeah.
And then I went and took the job. So it's not as if I didn't know what was coming.
Career suicide were the words you used.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I, in some respects, it probably was for me.
Anyway, Smith's and Harris's appointments would be made official in February of 2016. Another name set to join the team was Formula One star David Coulthard. He would ultimately be made a better offer by Channel 4, so he would yet again be another name to turn down Top Gear. However, not to worry, because they had a replacement, and on the 4th of March it was announced the new Top Gear host was gonna be Matt LeBlanc. Yes, Joey from Friends. Why? Well, Matt LeBlanc was a massive name 10 years prior, but he was a massive petrolhead who had previously topped the Steiner Easme Price car leaderboard. He'd also previously hosted the one-off special Top Gear The Races on BBC America, and that seemed to go well. His current TV show episodes, which was filming in London, had just wrapped for the series, and in his own words, he needed a job.
Alex Renton, the producer, flew to LA, we had a meeting and kind of told me what the idea was for the new shape of it, and it sounded cool, and I wasn't doing anything else. I said, yeah.
So, fuck it, might as well. He did actually attend a screen test for the role, so to the BBC's credit, they didn't just offer it to him because he's a big name. Well, was a big name. So, fair play.
Chris Evans, who started with the show a few months ago, he's only really mainly known in the UK, but Top Gear has 350 million viewers around the world. So by bringing in somebody like Matt LeBlanc, you've got somebody immediately that everybody knows, and I think it means it's less of a risk.
However, it's been reported that LeBlanc was Lisa Clark's appointment, and Chris didn't want him on the show. But now, Lisa's gone. But again, I imagine it'll go fine. On the 11th of February, Sabine Smits and Chris Harris were officially announced as presenters on the show. But they weren't the only presenters to be confirmed to be joining the show, as they seemed to be edging towards more of the format of the old Top Gear, with an ensemble cast rather than a trio. The format that became internationally popular. As they added 2 more presenters, and these would be Eddie Jordan and Rory Reid. Eddie Jordan was the owner of the former Formula One team Jordan Grand Prix. He also had some experience behind the wheel as a racing driver, and he was a seasoned pundit for Formula One. Now, Rory Reid was the least known of the new presenters. Remember those open auditions that were open to members of the public? Well, of the 15,000 people who applied, he was the one who succeeded. He did have previous written journalistic experience for various outlets and had TV presenting experience for Sky, ITV and the BBC, so he wasn't just some random geezer. Initially, he was turned down for the role, but then he sent in a car review in the form of a rap. And that got him through the door.
Oh, you were ready for the floors? My friend, you ain't even ready for the floors. Deep shag pile lambs were so plush, more comfy than your sofas. The It's hard to describe this, but I run my toes between the fibres when I drive this. The journalist after me's gonna be quite pissed, but he'll do the same.
When I've tried this method when applying for jobs in the past or trying to get a date, it's not gone well.
3 stars in his waistband. This car's not for a waste man.
So now we had our new presenting lineup. It had doubled in size. However, the majority of the press surrounded the show's most experienced presenter, and none of that press was good. In January, Chris was caught vomiting on a Top Gear shoot when being driven in a fast car by Sabine Smith in California. Not the best signs for the main host of a motoring show. There are also reports that he was struggling to talk to camera and drive at the same time. Again, not ideal for his position. This would be like hiring a chef with an allergy to saucepans, or hiring a leader without any shared life experience or knowledge of the lives of the people he was actually governing. Now, worse than claims of Chris's professional deficiencies were the claims that he was a massive knobhead, as newspaper articles contained allegations of unprofessional behaviour like not showing up to meetings, being a control freak, being out of control, and even worse, allegations of bullying. A BBC insider said that he shouted so violently he reduced an employee to tears, leading to an engineer having to step in. Chris Evans' behaviour had long been suspected as the reason that Lisa Clark had left the show, and she had to come out in defence of Evans and state that her stepping down from the show had nothing to do with him. However, Lisa's husband has contradicted this with what he said, so it leaves me sceptical. Maybe she was just trying to stick up for him.
You learn not to defend yourself in this business.
Right.
Because if you do, that will always be misconstrued as something or whatever it does. So you can never defend yourself, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You can defend people you're with, and you can also let this story run for long enough that the things they're saying will be seen and discovered to be absolute nonsense.
To make things even worse for the BBC, this wasn't the first time that bullying allegations had been aimed at Chris Evans, as he'd also faced them back in the 1990s when working on The Big Breakfast. A woman who worked with Chris in the 1990s sent an email to the BBC's Director General, Lord Tony Hall, in which she alleged that Chris exposed himself to her on a daily basis and walked around naked following his morning ritual of taking a bath. You see, here's where I would have placed your ads, Manscaped, if you had responded to my emails. Is it your marketing opportunities you're missing out on, mate? Anyway, she alleged that after walking around naked, he would sometimes touch himself, and on one occasion he grabbed her breasts. She also alleged that Evans' bullying intensified after she rejected his advances, turning other crew members against her. The BBC was accused of refusing to investigate these allegations, which, doesn't sound like them. This was not a good look for the corporation. Again, BBC, maybe you should have vetted the new face of one of your flagship shows a bit more thoroughly, especially seeing as what led to Jeremy's departure. Seems Auntie Beeb doesn't know how to do a quick Google search. Hopes for Series 23 didn't look great. Even the Stig got himself a side job in case the ship went down, as he was on the Dermot O'Leary show, The Getaway Car. It also might be a sign that the BBC didn't have the highest hopes for the new Top Gear and are trying to squeeze all the market value out of the Top Gear brand, just in case the value of that brand should, dive off a cliff in the near future. Like most of you, I also had no idea this existed. And also, like most of you, I'm not going to watch it. Not going to do it. By this point, production for the series was well underway, and the public would get another glimpse of what they might expect in Series 23 when in March footage was leaked of Matt LeBlanc and Ken Block performing stunts in a muscle car near famous landmarks around London, which does sound pretty cool. However, one of those landmarks, unfortunately, was the cenotaph, a monument to the fallen British soldiers of World War I and World War II.
Revving their way into a whole new controversy, this is the new Top Gear team in action in front of the cenotaph.
The images show are terrible. They look so disrespectful. There are mitigating circumstances, but absolutely no. Unreservedly apologise. I saw the images this morning for the first time, and I felt the same way as everybody else.
This sparked a lot of outrage, and was not the best press going into the new series.
I was genuinely appalled to see the desecration of our National War Memorial for a cheap publicity stunt for a TV programme by a national broadcaster.
Forget just being disrespectful to the legacy of one of Britain's most loved shows. They also managed to be disrespectful to Britain's entire history. What you doing? What you doing? Chris Evans had to apologise for this on his breakfast show. If only they'd headed to Bristol and done it at the Edward Colston statue, they might have been heroes, geezers. They also annoyed a rugby club for filming without permission. As previously mentioned, a lot of Top Gear's behind the scenes staff left with the trio. So that left a new group of employees to learn how to produce a show of this magnitude on the fly. And at moments like this, it was showing. Another such moment was when Chris Evans was caught on camera driving a car without its tax paid. As a whole, production for the show was not going well. I think Chris Evans' scale of ambition might have exceeded his capabilities, because as previously mentioned before, things behind the scenes were out of control. If making 16 episodes wasn't heavy enough of a task, they also announced a web-exclusive sister show, Extra Gear, because at the time every fucking show had to have one of these. Series 23 would get delayed multiple times and got pushed back from early May to late May and was scaled back to 6 episodes. By this point, it wasn't just Lisa Clark who left the show, but script editor Tom Ford also left. So on top of all their problems, Top Gear had to look elsewhere for its fashion provider. BBC Two and BBC Four controller Kim Schillinger also departed. Well, I mean, she didn't die, but she left the BBC. She was said to have been meddling with Top Gear, and might actually be part of the reason that Lisa Clark left the show after just 5 months. Who knows? It also might just be everyone trying to get off a sinking ship before the iceberg hits. Either way, the prognosis for the show did not look good.
I did other TV shows which were successful, and then I did this one, which was a dream. And the day I arrived, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
And somehow things would get even worse, as on the 23rd of May, allegations of non-recent sexual assault were made against Chris Evans over an alleged incident dating back to the 1990s, which would prompt a police investigation. Remember that female that emailed the BBC I mentioned earlier? Well, yeah, this is the accusation. So, yeah, BBC probably should have taken action when you first received that email. The police would ultimately determine that there was insufficient evidence and the case would be dropped in July. But as I say once more, probably not the ideal scenario for the host of one of your flagship shows. Still, could be worse, as on the 24th of May, 5th Gear was cancelled again. On the 19th of May, studio filming would get underway for the new era of Top Gear. And it did not go well. Not at all. It was described in the press as chaos. Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc struggled with their lines almost as much as I do when I'm trying to pronounce something in a different language, or English even. Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc struggled with their lines so much that the recording took over 4 hours. Chris also shouted at the audience because they weren't laughing or cheering loud enough. He was also mad that they had their arms folded and that they were wearing black. I mean, yeah, why would you want to draw more attention to your ginger hair? That makes sense. However, they did have an ace in the hole, as their celebrity guest was the worldwide megastar Brad Pitt. Oh no, he's cancelled. He cancelled last minute, and to make things worse, it was to film World War Z. Ugh, why? After what seems like a thoroughly miserable experience, audience members left early. And unlike the failed pilots back in 2002, where information was pretty scarce, this was the age of social media. So this whole ordeal added even more negative press to the show. Anyway, regardless of whether hopes for the series were high or not, curiosity for it certainly was. And on the 29th of May, 6.42 million people would tune in to find out what this new era of Top Gear would be like. Would, against all the odds, Top Gear continue or even exceed the heights that made it one of the most loved shows in the history of television?
Welcome to Top Gear with our all-new, improved audience.
No, it wouldn't. Right from the start, when you see the all-new, multicoloured, retina-bashing opening titles, overlaid with Chris Evans' underwhelming, awful voiceover, you just knew this was going to be a load of bollocks.
Tonight, I get chased.
Right behind us.
Matt gets chased.
See if I can shake him in these twisties.
And then, in a bizarre twist, I chase Matt. Come on, Great Britain.
The first thing you might notice is the studio. Still filmed in the Dunsfold Aerodrome, the revamped studio actually looked alright. I like the big screen, which beats the Top Gear small flat screens littered about the studio. This was an improvement. I also like the viewing balcony. But now we've got the positives out the way, let's get to the meat of the show. God bless this audience. 8 years on a waiting list, and you finally get the call to go to a Top Gear recording, and you had to see this shit instead of the Top Gear you actually wanted. To make things worse for the studio audience, their ear canals were being audibly obliterated by Chris Evans, who took to the role like a former boy band member to roofing.
And thanks to the US Navy and Sabine Schmitz, now undoubtedly the queen of the Vomit Comet.
Right from the first link, you can quickly determine Chris Evans doesn't have Jeremy's comedic ability. To give the first episode its credit, it did have some good VTs. However, they did seem to quickly abandon the show's edict of every challenge having to answer some kind of question. While this looks really cool, they were just ultimately driving around with muscle cars with guns on the top for no reason. There was also no real drama in the VTs. They didn't really give you a reason to care about what you were seeing. It was spectacle for the sake of it. In addition to this, their sense of pacing was just piss poor. They seemed to be determined to imitate all the hits of old Top Gear and just do them one after another as quickly as possible. In classic Top Gear, they would spend a whole episode on a road trip, and they would break it up over the course of the show, dedicating proper time and attention so it made you feel like you were going on a journey as the presenters were. They'd also explain the reason for the presenters doing what they were doing and picking the cars that they picked. Here, there was none of that. Just a geezer from TFI Friday and a geezer from Friends driving in Reliant Robins with American and British flags painted on, because fuck it, why not?
You had sort of a minute's footage of a Reliant Robin being towed on a tow truck, which isn't the most dynamic of TV footage for a car show.
They would also shove in cameos from athletes to drag queens, restaurant staff, the ref from Gladiators. They kept speeding through these appearances and the challenges at a breakneck pace. It was hard to keep track of what was happening. This was Russo booking in its purest essence. They didn't even count up the scores for the challenges. There was no leaderboard or anything. What's even the point in them doing what they're doing? Why? What's it leading to? Also, the some say jokes were shite.
Some say the day he was born, he drove himself home from the hospital, and that he's being investigated for irregular emissions.
Wisely, they did decide to stick with Jessica by the Allman Brothers for their opening theme song. You know how it goes by now, don't need to hear it again. Now, for some reason, they decided to change up the Star in a Reasonably Priced Car segment. They now called it Star in a Rallycross Car, adding in 2 off-road sections. Also, for some reason, they decided to have 2 guests now. I mean, if they wanted an easy win, what they could have done was do an invitational Star in a Reasonably Priced Car, which would have taken the pressure off Evans' lack of comedic talent, but no, they didn't opt to do that. They also didn't take the time to give the new track a proper introduction, so they just sort of sprung it on the audience as the celebrities were going around it. They also didn't really give Sabine, Rory, Eddie or Chris Harris an introduction at all. All of a sudden, the show went from a presenting duo to Sabine Smits and a load of blokes in various states of follicle decline showing up at various intervals. As for Matt LeBlanc, he was actually alright. He had what Hollywood stars used to call charm. His cool charisma shone through.
As we all know, one of the hazards of modern Britain is being pursued by bloodthirsty evil villains. Or, to give them their Latin name, paparazzi.
And he was genuinely funny. On top of that, the American in Britain cultural differences were a good, reliable source of comedy for the rest of the series. To be fair, Matt's comedic ability shouldn't be that much of a surprise, because he was of course one of the stars of one of the biggest sitcoms of all time, and a less successful spin-off. He's actually been in 3 spin-offs, did you know? Yeah. Matt's aerial nomad film was actually pretty good. If you were being generous, you could say it was so good that it actually might have fit in to the old Top Gear.
Mike's gone. It's an all aerial battle now. Aerial nomad versus aerial assholes.
But that VT's over, back to the studio and Chris shouting at you. Something else that helped Matt was the fact that he wasn't the face of the show, which meant he didn't have quite as big shoes as Chris had to step into, as he could fulfill more of the Hammond and May role of playing off the main host.
Okay, just checking.
There were claims that Chris and Matt didn't actually get on. Both of them have denied this, but yeah, they don't really look like mates when you see them on TV. To be fair, in this series, none of the presenters look like mates. They look like they hadn't even met before. And they might not have actually, I don't know, I've not found out if they have or not, wouldn't surprise me. One good thing is it did make me appreciate the road tests a lot more, because at least when we were seeing those road tests, we didn't have to see the cringy forced interactions between the presenters. They'd also cut out the news section, presumably because of that lack of chemistry. So, not the best start for the new Top Gear. All round, it was a bit of a step down.
To start with, I was excited to see it back because this has had a whole year of media sort of anticipation, so it was a big launch. But I felt that they could have totally revamped the whole format and gone with something so fresh that you couldn't compare it to the old, you know, the Clarkson's Top Gear era. Because it was like going into sort of a very famous house that you know and love, where all they've really done is put some sort of new tiles in a bathroom.
The next episode would see viewers decline to 4.06 million. They did keep throwing more celebrity cameos in there, and they kept speeding through the challenges. Chris's jokes continued to be shite. He had the loudness of Jeremy, he just didn't have any of the wit or charm. However, on the positive side, Matt was still really good. Eddie Jordan made his first appearance, and I forgot he was there, to be honest, he didn't do much. There was also too much shilling on the show. Tiny Temper playing his song twice, that just takes the piss. That performance at the end as well. Proper cringe, what are you doing? To be fair to it, this episode was better than the first one, but that might just be because of how hard it would be to be worse. Viewers would fall in the next episode as they would reach 3.44 million, and they'd stay around 3 million for the rest of the series, which is half of what they started with, and about half of what Clarkson, May and Hammond were doing in their last series.
Let's not kid ourselves, it didn't work. And as it didn't work, we were still filming studios on that weekly basis. So you had that weird situation where you're part of a ship that's sinking quite quickly, and everyone's going, we got to keep paddling for another 3 weeks. And you're there going, what the, this is... And by the end, it was utterly bizarre.
They were on such a bad run of form, the show was in danger of being called Tottenham Gear. The show was an instant failure, with pretty much everyone. Even Chris knew it was shite.
The feeling of walking and going, like, what have I signed up for?
Yeah.
This is monumental. What am I doing?
No.
That's how
it began. But then, like a second later, it's like, this is not going to work. This is, win-win situations.
Yeah.
This is the biggest lose-lose. And I knew on day one, I thought, this is not going to work. And it was just a question of just writing out, thinking, well, I've signed the car. I'll stay here for as long as I need to and then get out as soon as I can for the sake of everyone and everything.
I'd gone from the internet, where I had a fair amount of love. Most people quite like what I did.
Oh, yeah, 100%, yeah.
Because it was, it wasn't too expensive and it was pretty honest. So you go from being loved to being freaking hated.
It wasn't helped by the fact the Euros were on at the same time, and the series closer ended up happening on the same day as Brexit. Yep, all round a bad day for the UK. Not sure what's worse, to be honest. Among all the bollocks, there were some positives. Chris Harris, Matt LeBlanc and Sabine Smits were all good additions to the show. Kevin Hart and Anthony Joshua on the show, they were really good. I mean, not even Chris Evans can fuck that up. Matt LeBlanc and Ken Block's tour of London, that was class. Of course you had to have a celebrity cameo. Tom Odell, remember him? Yeah. Rory Reid's Jaguar film was pretty cool, especially the end. The Rolls Royce film, that was alright. Actually, on reflection, by the 5th episode, the show had improved. They'd calmed down with the pacing, they'd stopped doing the shitty walk towards camera thing at the end. But despite these improvements, Top Gear Series 23 still failed spectacularly, as I think everyone knew it would do. Episode 6 viewership's overnight figures were just 1.9 million, a 13-year low.
In fact, I'm trying to think of a metaphor for someone who's really tried their hardest with something and it hasn't worked. No, nothing's coming to mind.
No, I got nothing.
I got nothing at all.
In the defence of Chris Evans, he was in an unwinnable position. If you change the show too much, it's not going to be what the fans love. Keep it too similar, and it'd be just a pale imitation.
We could have produced the best films ever. We didn't, but we could have done. They still would have been shit canned because they weren't.
Yeah.
They weren't the Three Amigos.
Yeah.
So, look, it's a funny old product to work on, and because it's so embedded in the national psyche and everyone has their opinion of what it should be for them, when you don't deliver exactly that, i.e. if one of you isn't a bit slow and mumbling, yet small, full of energy and large and cynical, then you're immediately not giving them what they want.
Yeah.
So it was always going to be a problem.
As Chris Evans put it, the show was built for Jeremy Clarkson, because he was one of the ones who built it. So anyone who isn't Clarkson is going to struggle as the face of the show. Chris was also struggling with the really early starts and the heavy workload that the show involved. To make things worse, he and Matt's relationship didn't seem to improve as the show went on, and Matt reportedly issued a him or me ultimatum. Again, everyone involved denies this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this actually happened. On top of this, there were also reports that Matt wasn't the only one in the Top Gear team who didn't get on well with Evans. A BBC insider described Chris's behaviour as diva-ish and behaving worse than Clarkson. If you combine that with the fact that it was definitely a worse host than Clarkson, this seemed to be only going in one direction. Evans' fate on the show seemed to be inevitable. And on the 4th of July, the inevitable was made official, as Chris Evans decided to declare his independence from Top Gear and leave the show. Hey, now Brits can celebrate that day as well.
Well, what we understand is that this was a decision that Chris Evans came to last week. He told the BBC he didn't want to continue on the programme. He felt he'd had a lot of personal criticism. It was a decision that he reached alone without encouragement from the BBC. One phrase that's been used by a colleague is that he felt like a square peg in a round hole.
I've never been involved in something that people wanted to fail so much. That was the incredible thing. I'm not, you know, am I friends with Chris Evans? No, I'm not. But what I will say is I've never seen the media attack someone the way he.
Yeah,
he was on the front cover of The Sun pretty much every day going with some other story.
We went to Italy, to like the mountains.
Yeah.
Right? I thought, you know, we want to live in Italy. And within a second I realised, no, I don't love Italy. I love Italian restaurants in London.
Yes.
Yeah. And then and 1 second on the Top Gear side, I thought, no, I just love the show. I don't want to do the show.
I see what
different.
you did.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
Originally, we were set to get a 2-part Christmas special, but the BBC abandoned those plans, instead choosing to focus on the production of Series 24 and turn this show around. And fuck me, if they want to do that, they need all the time they can get. In place of the Christmas special, the BBC planned to make a highlights programme of Series 23, which they hoped would turn into a DVD that they were going to sell the next year. However, there simply wasn't enough highlights to actually make it. If you needed another marker of just how bad this past series was, well, the Series 23 DVD sold just 50,000 copies. For context, DVDs from the Clarkson, Hammond and May era sold at least 800,000, going up to 1 million copies. So yeah, quite a drop off. However, it doesn't stop there. In perhaps the ultimate humiliation, that festive period saw the BBC release a Top Gear A to Z 2-part DVD made up of footage from the Clarkson, Hammond and May era, and it was one of the biggest selling DVDs of the year, selling an estimated 500,000 copies in the first month. So 10 times what Series 23 sold. That's how bad Series 23 was received. To add even more insult to injury, Clarkson, Hammond and May's new show, The Grand Tour, had debuted on Amazon with an iconic opening sequence. The show proved to be Amazon's best performing series. However, that show could be a video all by itself. Let me know in the comments if there's an appetite for this. Might make a video about it. So it seems interest for Top Gear had predictably left with the classic trio.
Yeah. And on that terrible disappointment for Top Gear,
the ratings were back to 2002-2003 standards. However, unlike those days, the budget was much higher. This show was proving to be more of a liability to the BBC than an asset. You'd be forgiven for thinking maybe the BBC, they would just can the show. The Top Gear A to Z made 10 million. Why not just make money off the tape archive? Or even better, why not sell the format? Sell it to Amazon, you'd probably get an ungodly fee so Clarkson, Hammond and May could continue doing their show. Well, July of that year saw the BBC lose another one of their flagship shows, The Great British Bake Off. 2017 would be the year the BBC's royal charter was up for renewal. So losing Top Gear, probably now more than ever, was a risk the BBC couldn't take. So they persevered with the show and signed Matt LeBlanc to a new 2-year deal. He would now be the face of Top Gear, and the BBC decided to proper change up the show for Series 24. They built a new studio, which looked fucking class actually, really like it. I take back all the praise for the Series 23 set. This right here was the dog's bollocks. They took inspiration from the 1994 Top Gear logo in designing a new one, and they had a new title sequence, which was alright. They go back to having a trio of presenters, that being Matt LeBlanc, Chris Harris and Rory Reid. Sabine Smits and Eddie Jordan would make cameos from time to time. On the 5th of March 2017, we would get a chance to see what this revamped version of Top Gear would look like. And it was fucking class. I was actually really surprised by how much I liked this series. I don't know if it's because Series 23 set the bar so low I didn't think Top Gear was still capable of making anything look good, or if it's just because it was actually just really good in its own right. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed watching it. Without Chris Evans, the viewing experience all round was just a lot more pleasant. The three presenters actually had good chemistry. Not quite Clarkson, Hammond and May levels, but still very good. In this series, all three presenters really had the room to let their personalities shine through, especially Rory and Chris, who didn't have Matt's pre-Top Gear fame.
I'm feeling slightly guilty though. This car has lived for 13 years and 570,000 miles, and I've had it 42 miles. 42 miles.
Yeah, that last one was probably the most special.
They restored the Top Gear test track to its traditional state, and they replaced the star in a rallycross car with star in a reasonably fast car. I mean, I would have preferred if they'd just gone back to star in a reasonably priced car, but still, this is an improvement. They also went back to having just one guest. They introduced a sit-down talk segment to the show, not quite the news, but it was similar. And the guest would actually join them for this segment, so we got to see the guest in more of a relaxed setting. We also got to see Chris Harris instructing the celebs before they went round for their lap, and we got to see him get incredibly enraged every time, which I thought was class. They were distinguishing his character as a bit grumpy. I mean, he got so mad he destroyed any chance that his hair might actually grow back. Also for this series, they dropped the Some Say Stig intro, which is for the best because it's not going to be as good if you don't have Jeremy and Richard Porter working on them. And they stopped the Coming Up on Tonight show voiceover. Even better still, they stopped having a million cameos. And they had a lot less shilling. Not none, but a lot less. Series 24 saw them slow down the pace a lot. They did road trips like they used to do them, with the presenters, at least in storyline, picking the cars themselves, slagging each other's selections off and taking you on a proper journey. I also really liked the new addition of revealing the cars by opening containers. That was a nice touch. The series as a whole had some really nice moments. Their Kazakhstan road trip, that was class.
Volvo, and definitely the Mercedes, they're going to go for it, aren't they? They're going to be speeding all the way there. They'll probably end up breaking down, and then the London cab will just... It'll be... It's like the hare and the tortoise, isn't it?
Tortoise.
Tortoise.
The hatchback Pac-Man challenge, that was genius. The billionaires race in Dubai, that was also great. Whoa, what a place. I could see why you'd have a geezer relieve himself on you so you can get a trip there. Oh, very nice. Hammer racing, that was good. The Cuba road trip, that was class. Turning a car into a yacht, that was alright. Not as good as amphibious cars, but still very entertaining. And the James Bond style car chase segment, that was also class.
Where are your trousers? Don't draw attention to it.
Do you know what, thinking about it, that last graphic was a bit harsh. That's better. Maybe the best thing about this series was that the presenters actually looked like they were having fun, and therefore it was fun to watch them.
you want to get along because it's better for the show, ideally. But turns out we all get along really well. We have a lot of laughs. Half the stuff we come up with, you cannot say on television. So therefore, we're getting along great.
Top Gear had improved immensely from the last series. However, this wasn't reflected in the ratings, as viewership for the series averaged 3.15 million, even worse than Series 23. It seems like that previous series had done its damage, and drove away, pun intended, at least half of the fans that the classic trio drew to the show.
I mean, I don't know anyone that's tried to take on a brand like that when it's reinventing itself. Normally, either the brand ends or there's an element of love for the rejuvenation because the person that was the previous incumbent left under different circumstances. So, if, for example, when Terry Wogan left Blankety Blank, he had a chance to say, this is my last series and everyone loves him, and then to make sure that the next person's loved by introducing them. We just got, bang, a load of aggro between Jeremy and the BBC, and then we had to get in there, Lion's Den.
Series 25 was also really good. The American road trip was excellent. Matt and Chris searching for Bigfoot, for me, is up there with some of Top Gear's best moments.
You believe in Bigfoot? Yeah. Find another one. Bigfoot. Have you ever seen a Bigfoot?
No, I've never seen him, but I know he's out there.
Do you know what? Matt is obsessed with Bigfoot. So he remains a good mate of mine, and he just loves Bigfoot. He always says, and he talks about, there's a forest in Washington State that is, if you look at it on a map, it's about the size of our country.
Really?
And he just says there's areas of that forest that have never been visited by a human being, and probably never will. So is it conceivable there's something in there that we haven't seen? And when he puts it that way, you believe it. So he always said, and he always said to production, we're going to do a film where me and Harris go and look for Bigfoot. I just loved it.
And the whole episode set in Japan, that was outstanding. Also the tribute to the 2CV, can't forget that. That was really funny.
Be a good church wife and put the damn hat on.
And I'm pretty sure that 1940s French farmers didn't wear stovepipe hats.
Well, this farmer did.
However, again, it wasn't reflected in the ratings, as Series 25 averaged 3.11 million viewers. Matt, Rory and Chris were good, but they're always going to get compared to Clarkson, Hammond and May, because, they presented the same show. And as good as this new trio were, they're sort of like Wings. They're good, but, they're not the Beatles, are they? Also, when the thank fuck that loud ginger is gone and the nice to see Joey from Friends is doing well factors have worn off, the show does get a bit underwhelming. To make things worse, I don't think this new creative team really understood what made the show work. For example, the great thing about the How Hard Can It Be challenges was seeing the weird and wonderful minds of these three distinct personalities expressed through their creations. And while turning a car into a yacht is cool, what does it really express about any of the presenters involved? The reason the Bigfoot segment works so well is because the show established Matt's love for gadgets, heavy machinery, and his childlike wonder, so it was very much within character that he would believe that Bigfoot existed. The show also took time to establish Chris's grumpy, curmudgeon-like persona, so his reaction to Matt LeBlanc's antics and ideas also seemed in character. However, segments like this were few and far between, and now might be a good time to mention the Stig. They completely wrecked the mystique of the Stig. And they also went back to the teenage Stig idea a few too many times for my liking. This series also saw Chris and Matt do a lot of stuff without Rory, and although they did make a good comedic duo, the trio worked. Why fuck with it? Also, Chris would get less grumpy when he was teaching the guests, as his character got watered down a bit. Again, why fuck with it? And the changes, sadly, didn't stop there, as on the 31st of May 2018, it was announced Matt LeBlanc would be leaving Top Gear. So just after audiences were getting used to the new face of the show, it would be changing once again. And Matt wasn't even leaving for anything good, like, you know, getting in a fight, saying something controversial, crashing. He just wanted to spend more time with his friends and family, like some kind of fucking pansy. Come on, Matt, I'm trying to write a script here. You lovely bastard, you. Snort something called Get in a Controversy. Come on, mate. Oh. Anyway, now it seems Top Gear has finally run its course. With over 25 years and over 40 years on TV, they were oh, no, they're carrying on. Yep, the show would be carrying on. And to make things worse, Matt wasn't the only one leaving, as Reid would also say goodbye to the show and would go back to presenting Extra Gear. Oh, that's a shame. The reason for the demotion are unclear. I've read maybe he stepped down to take a lucrative role as the YouTube director at Auto Trader, so maybe it was a money issue. Who knows? I mean, probably he does. Let me know in the comments if you're watching, geezer. Do you know, by the way, he was 36 when he joined Top Gear? Oh, he looks good. Let me know what your diet and skincare routine are as well, geezer, if you're watching. Looking good, mate, looking good. Eddie Jordan would also leave the show after the next series. He looked less good. Don't really need to know your skincare routine there, mate, if you're watching. Anyway, Chris Harris would remain on the show, and Sabine Smits would also continue to pop up. So Top Gear would need to find 2 new hosts. Among the bookies' favourites were once again Jodie Kidd, Guy Martin, Philip Glenister, Dermot O'Leary, because, you know, he's always in the frame for every job. And weirdly, one of the favourites was TV chef James Martin, which actually makes more sense when you find out he's a massive petrol head, and apparently has a bit of a temper. You know, key attributes to being a Top Gear host. On the 27th of October, the speculation would end, as the new Top Gear hosts would be Paddy McGuinness and Freddie Flintoff. Why? Just why? Well, it turns out both of them are actually car fans, and both of them were heroes of Chris Harris. And this time, when they held a screen test, they actually had a chemistry test. They also had to do a review of the Dacia Duster, and they both passed. Paddy McGuinness is one of the UK's best known and well loved, some geezers like him, I like him. For some people, he's quite annoying. He became famous back in the 2000s working with Peter Kay on that Peter Kay thing, Phoenix Nights and Max and Paddy's Road to Nowhere. He then became a successful stand-up, done a million different TV shows, the most notable being Take Me Out. Remember that geezer? Oh, what could have been? What could have been? He was a great wrestler, say what you like about him as a human being. In addition to being a petrol head, Paddy also had experience of the road trip genre of TV programming, and he also had some experience hosting motoring TV shows, having just hosted Stars in Their Cars. All of this experience would put him in good stead for his role on Top Gear, and he's also a trained lifeguard as well, so you know, that might come in handy. As for Freddie Flintoff, he's one of England's most loved cricketers. You could say one of the most loved cricketers of all time. Cricket is a sport that a lot of people enjoy apparently, for some reason, don't get it myself. Since retiring from the sport, he built up quite a CV on television, with perhaps his best known TV roles as being a captain on A League of Their Own and being crowned the King of the Jungle in I'm a Celeb. Over the years, he also garnered a lot of headlines for his various antics under the influence of alcohol, or for short, being a fucking ledge. All of these antics, his charity work and his pursuits outside of cricket made him a massive crossover star. Freddie, real name Andrew, was also a risk taker who seemed up for anything, so he would be perfect for the show. A bit too perfect for the show, but we'll get to that later.
But then it was a long wait for that phone call to tell us, and I think I've not got this, have I? And when I found out, it was like being picked for England again.
However, before we could see how they'd get on, we still had Series 26 to air, which had already been filmed by this point. And the series, it was fine. The Tuk Tuk segment was really good. Reid and Sabine Smith's mountain race, that was a good watch.
Come, give me your rocks.
I'm not sure you understand how this works. We're not a team. We're competing against each other.
No.
Chris Harris and Matt LeBlanc's Bentley review, that was pretty funny. And the second-hand luxury limousine challenge, that was pretty entertaining.
Just move from one finger to two fingers.
That, my friend, is panache.
Harris even took a Raven WrestleMania 17 bump. Oh, what a worker that geezer is. All in all, the series was good, but you're not missing much by skipping it. But to summarise, not a painful watch by any means. One negative I did have was the fact Top Gear seemed to be running out of ideas by this point, as they did revert to doing the same or at least similar challenges to what they'd already done in Top Gear's past. And that would be a bit more forgivable if they were improving on the past, but they didn't really do these ideas as well as they had been done in Top Gear's golden age. Ratings for this series would drop once again, as they averaged 2.35 million viewers. A well-made show with exotic locations, cool stunts and fast cars will always have an audience, but without those larger-than-life personalities that pushed the show into the mainstream, that audience did have a ceiling. This show was once again, well and truly, just a car show.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how thrilled are you that Top Gear is nowhere near as successful now that you're not on it?
It's a hard face to pull, this one. Let me try.
A clear indication of the show's decline in status was the level of guests that they were able to attract. No offence to the cast of episodes and Live at the Apollo, but they did used to have world famous stars on the show. The guests they would get at this point just didn't really compare. Apart from JK, loved Jamiroquai. The BBC would end up scrapping Extra Gear. Yeah, I didn't give a shit either. But this did mean Reid was no longer involved with Top Gear, which is a shame. Again, I liked him. So once again, audiences tuned in to see another revamp of the show, as on the 16th of June 2019, Series 27 debuted.
Starting all over again, saying hello to friends. I'm wondering when the time will end. I'm trying to get away from sin. I keep starting all over again.
The debut episode was actually received quite well. The show made a few changes. Top Gear now didn't have a traditional frontman. Instead, all three shared the responsibility. Well, I suppose Paddy McGuinness, as the most seasoned TV host, kind of took that responsibility. They also had the celebs do a challenge on the test track before they did their laps. And they also changed the font for this series as well. Oh, steady on, going a bit too far there. In the build-up to the show, there seemed to be keen interest in getting across that this would be a nicer, friendlier version of Top Gear.
They're great to work with, I love them to bits, and they are an utter disaster. But it's going to be good fun, at least.
No more jabs at different nations or different cultures. No more close-to-the-knuckle jokes. No more use of the word the.
Tell you what we need some rocks or something, don't we, under wheels.
And in some ways, I can see what they mean, as the first episode seemed to be designed to get the presenters to open up to the audience, as they took a road trip across Ethiopia in their first cars that they owned. However, I don't really know what they mean by saying it would be a more sensitive, friendly version of the show with more hugs and nice bits. As straight away they took the banter and the pranking up another level. At times in this series, it seems like they were reenacting Three Stooges routines. I do like their chemistry, but it did seem a bit forced. I mean, maybe they really did have an instant connection, But you'd think they were schoolboy friends, the way they instantly started taking a piss out of each other.
And then you talk about the things that I did in the car. I'm not sure they're suitable for a family show, actually.
Don't pretend you. Don't pretend you had girls in there.
Not his own.
Not your own.
You holding a piece of plastic and trying to say words and numbers is at the very outer limit of your cerebral capacity.
Savage! Savage!
This trio would lean into more of a jackass, gross-out style of humour, which might be an attempt to compensate for the fact that they weren't the classic trio that everyone wanted to see. Don't get me wrong, I like seeing a geezer getting lube squirted in his face as much as the next man, but a lot of the time there seemed to be a really thin, or indeed no justification, for why they were partaking in some of these challenges. They just knew it would be a bit of a shortcut to a few laughs. Again, nothing wrong with that, a laugh's a laugh, fair play. The first episode of Series 27 was actually really enjoyable. All three of them seemed to be thoroughly nice geezers, and that really came across on screen. All of them very likeable.
Paddy and Fred are good people to work with. They're good human beings. They're very funny. They're not cloying or sickly sweet. There's a great balance between being really nasty to each other but in a nice way. That's the key to being friends, isn't it?
In addition to this, Paddy McGuinness's comedic experience was a really good boost to the show.
Dogger.
He was able to inject some really good one-liners, and I just love his voice. I mean, it might proper annoy some people, but I'm not one of those people. I like it. He's just an enjoyable geezer to listen to.
I'm not a mechanic, but in technical terms, that's
This series had some really great moments. The electric sports car challenge, that was really good.
It's like I've had a conger eel stuck up me lads.
Converting a hearse into a family car, that was great.
Go easy with the car, it's a prototype.
I tell you what, the only other athlete with as much bad luck behind the wheel as this geezer might be Michael Antonio. Get well soon, by the way.
That'll come in handy.
Too soon.
Chris and Freddie's Formula off-road racing, that was great. Didn't look great to take part in, looked scary as fuck, but it was great to watch, My favourite part of the series though, was Freddie and Paddy's cheap car challenge in Borneo.
Flying snakes.
They're not going to bother you.
Sumatra cobras that spray poison in your eyes and blind you.
You'll be all right.
Black leopards stalk you in silence. One bite on the throat, you're dead.
You're from Preston, there's worse round there.
The challenge involved them delivering 2 cars to a mystery car collector, the Sultan of Brunei. After double checking it wasn't Mickey Pearce pulling a fast one, they had an immense journey, culminating in them aided by the help of the Gurkha soldiers to power through the Brunei rainforest. I tell you what, how good are Creedence Clearwater Revival? I've always liked them, but doing this series really made me appreciate how many bangers they have. Really good. After getting through the rainforest, they arrived at the Royal Palace in Bandar Seri Begawan. This was a great bit of television that I think could have rivaled the quality of classic Top Gear. However, after filming had been completed, the team discovered that while on the flight home, the Sultan of Brunei had passed laws making homosexuality and adultery illegal by punishment of death. Now I know Freddie's an attractive lad, if I was, but how powerful are those urges that you need to make some laws? What are you doing? Global criticism would lead the Sultan of Brunei to suspend enforcing this law. However, the threat of this law led the BBC to consider benching the film altogether. In the end, they decided not to, out of respect to the people of Brunei and the Gurkhas who helped them. And probably the budget, because you know, shoots like that do cost a lot of money. And probably because it would mean they'd have to film something else to take its place. Instead, they decided to paint their cars in the colours of the Pride flag as a reaction to the proposed laws. Was this virtue signalling? Well, maybe, but I thought this was a classy touch. And to be honest, I think it was done out of sincerity. And the messaging wasn't rammed down your throat, pun intended. I like this. Good job, geezers. The series' average viewership was 4.45 million viewers, which was pretty good, and it seemed to be good enough to garner a return to the specials. This special was great. This was actually the one episode of the post-Clarkson, Hammond and May era that I'd actually seen before researching this series, and I remember thinking, it's pretty good, and I tell you what, it holds up. It had a great mixture of comedy, drama and insight into the local culture. I'd recommend it. The ascent up the mountains was a particularly tense, edge-of-your-seat experience.
For the first time in my working life, having done lots of silly things in cars, I just want to send my my kids a message, because I'm quite scared.
These types of life or death experiences, similar to the ones faced by Clarkson, Hammond and May, that makes a team of colleagues who get on quite well into proper close friends who would be there for each other when times got rough. All in all, this special was great. However, my feelings weren't exactly reflected in the ratings, as it attracted 3.35 million viewers, which was less than half of the previous special, the Patagonia special. Well, a quarter if you combine both parts together. However, the Nepal special did get a lot of good press, and that seemed to pay off as the debut of the following series attracted 5.22 million viewers, and the series would maintain a similar viewership to that as it averaged out to just under 5 million. And I can see why. It was great. The seaside challenge was brilliant. The car bungee jump, that was insane.
With some of the stuff I've done before, I've got this reputation of being a bit of a daredevil and no fear. It is not the case. I'm bricking it in that car. I'm over a dam in Switzerland, and it was a car bungee and a metro, and I had to pull the handbrake to go. And the one thing about bungee jumping is if it's on your legs, you know you're attached. But I'm in a car and I'm going down just thinking, please, please be attached.
Oh, because you don't know if the car's
attached. You can't feel anything, can you? You've got a seatbelt on, but that's not going to help, is it, when you hit the ground?
Fred, have you got the handbrake on?
The Peru road trip, that was fantastic. Formula Off-Road Part 2, this segment was unreal, until the car broke down. The airbag penalty shootout, that was a nice idea, perfect kind of Top Gear silliness. Even KSI's ear-piercing laugh couldn't ruin it.
Just like... Oh, shit!
What is that? Jeez!
The tribute to Colin McRae, like all of Top Gear's tributes, was absolutely amazing. Overall, Series 28 was a great watch. Top Gear seemed to be finding its feet once again, and confidence in the show must have been high, as the next series saw them promoted to BBC One.
They've gone all out for BBC One, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've gone, how can we get the ratings? We'll kill them all.
In February of 2020, production for Series 29 of Top Gear got underway, and things were looking good. Well, that was until March, because the world would be brought to a halt by something called the coronavirus. Remember that? With Zoom calls, toilet paper? Not fun, not fun. Top Gear was one of 80 BBC programmes that had to stop filming due to the virus, having to comply with COVID restrictions threw a huge spanner in the works for Top Gear, because of the nature of what the show was. However, the show's executive producers Claire Pizzey and Alex Renton set about coming up with solutions to get the series finished. By this point, they'd already filmed half of the VTs, which eased the pressure on the team. They'd already filmed footage which contained some overseas shoots, and now they had travel restrictions to contend with, they decided to make the rest of the series like the John Pertwee era of Doctor Who and film the remaining series in the UK. Instead of getting 600 people packed into the Top Gear studio, oh fuck me, imagine if someone sneezed in that setting, it'd be a massacre. Well, the Stig would have been alright. Instead of filming in the Top Gear studio, they decided to film outside, creating a drive-in with the presenters on a stage performing to 500 people who turned up in their own cars. In addition to that, they decided to ditch the star in a reasonably fast car segment, and the 3 presenters would also agree to regular COVID tests. On the 4th of October 2020, the show was ready to air. And as soon as the show opened, the audience was immediately hit by the staggering visual of Paddy's hair. Fuck me. What's going on there? What's he done? Oh, whoever that barber was, he needed to be closed down. Oh, what's going on? As for the drive-in setting, I thought this looked fucking cool. I don't know why they didn't do this sooner. Looks way better than the Top Gear studio. It kinda looked like that Iron Circle match between Ken Shamrock and Steve Blackman, or as Chris Harris described it, a mixture of low-rent rock festival meets a 1960s drive-through cinema. Yeah, his description was better. It did kinda look like a 1960s drive-through. Probably a lot less fingering in this instance though. As for the series, it was pretty good. Not one of the best, but it did have some good moments. The challenge where the presenters couldn't get out of their cars for 24 hours, the Cyprus car rental holiday, that was great. The write-off challenge, which culminated in the Wall of Death, that was pretty good. Also, the Sterling Moss tribute, that was quite moving. And Paddy McGuinness's electric ice cream van, that was hilarious. Again, just proper Top Gear silliness. Loads of funny moments in this, really good. Someone that you may have noticed that was absent from this series was Sabine Smits. Well, in July, she revealed through a Twitter post that she had been battling cancer for the previous 3 years. On the 16th of March 2021, Sabine Smits would sadly pass away, aged just 51.
The former racing driver Sabine Schmitz has died at the age of 51.
And for her aggressive driving style, the so-called Queen of the Nürburgring became a presenter of the motoring show in 2015. But her best-known Top Gear appearance came a decade earlier when she drove a Ford Transit van around the world-famous racetrack. And today, Jeremy Clarkson led tributes saying she was always such a sunny person.
Tributes poured out as the motoring world mourned the loss of a great racing driver, TV presenter and phenomenal human being. After a successful petition, the first corner of the Nordschleife at the Nürburgring was renamed the Sabine Smits Curve in tribute to her. And out of respect, I took the time to learn how to pronounce all of those words. Hopefully.
When you have a dream, you have to trust yourself. And then you must follow your dreams. If you stay at home on the couch, nothing will happen. Nobody will help you. You have to help yourself. And this is the thing. You have to push yourself. Don't trust other people. And they say, you got a contract. You know, you're never sure they are saying the truth. So you have really to fight for yourself and keeping focused. And I think, yeah, worked out so far.
Just 4 days after the series ended, the UK went into a second lockdown. This meant it wouldn't be possible to have a live audience for the next series of the show. Faced with the rather grim prospect of presenting to an empty studio hangar or an empty field, they instead decided to present the 30th series of Top Gear from BBC Television Centre. This would now be their home, as they would never again return to the Top Gear studio in Dunsfold. I imagine someone probably left a jacket or a cable hanging about so I had to pop in, but you get my point, they didn't film there again. Series 30 was pretty cool. It was the shortest series at only 4 episodes, and the travel and COVID restrictions limited how good it could be.
You know, we struggled. We had to make an entire series in half the time. under COVID conditions in the UK. That's a very big change for us. So some of the films just went on a bit too long.
But nevertheless, the team driving in their dad's old cars, that was a touching challenge. The Bond segment, that was pretty good. I mean, Top Gear had already done a whole Bond special, which was a lot better. But never mind. The midlife crisis challenge, that was pretty funny. And yeah, the show in general, it wasn't bad, but it was just a bit boring, to be honest. However, what wasn't boring was the half-an-hour tribute to Sabine Smits. This was excellent. Even Clarkson, Hammond and May returned for it.
When she walked into a room, it was as though everything got just a bit brighter and a bit louder. It was just, she was turning everything up on your television till it was just like that. And that's what 5 minutes with Sabine was like.
It's on iPlayer if you haven't seen it. I definitely recommend it. Episode 1 of the next series saw a similarly touching tribute to Eddie Kidd. This was also fantastic. Definitely check this out. They did a caravan challenge, which Top Gear have done in the past and have done a lot better. But you know, when in doubt, throw up some milk on each other. There you go.
You're milking it now, man. You're milking it. You're sorry.
To be fair, they did this challenge with electric SUVs this time, as the show had taken more of an environmentalist twist as the post-Clarkson era progressed. You know, the world might end up being a pleasant place in the future, so might as well take care of it, just in case. Whilst they and the world were still dealing with some COVID restrictions, they could travel abroad again. So Paddy and Chris went to Iceland with second-hand British cars. And this was fun to watch, definitely recommend it. Nice to see the containers back as well, that's a nice touch. Also in the series, they tried to find the best affordable cars for first-time drivers, which again, Top Gear had already done before. Had a DeLorean tribute, and that was pretty good. We also got an excellent challenge where Freddie Flintoff trained to become a professional racing driver. Now of course this training was on top of the stunt driving lessons that all the Top Gear presenters would surely receive when they joined the show, as by this point Freddie, like the rest of them, had already engaged in a lot of high risk driving before this. Oh, hold on, no, it turns out that might not be the case.
But no, there's no driving lesson. They don't, when you join the show, they don't sit you down and give you a 5-day course in high performance driving.
In fact, when Reid was on the show, it was actually him that had to ask for extra driving training.
I said, listen, can you give me some extra tuition on the specific stunts that you ask us to do during this show? And eventually they gave me a couple of hours with a stunt driver to practice some of the maneuvers that they occasionally ask us to do.
This led to him being given a few extra hours with a stunt driver. These lax safety precautions were in fact a great source of concern behind the scenes, especially for trained racing driver Chris Harris.
There was a bit of a arms race between us and maybe the other big car show, the Grand Tour at the time, to go ever more stupid.
Whether the BBC gave them the added tuition and time and looked after them enough to be able to put them into those situations where they would feel comfortable and safe, that's not for me to say because I wasn't there. But based on my experience, if you ask me whether putting someone without that level of driving experience in those situations and whether it would end well, I don't think that's. I didn't think it was going to end well. That was my first ever thought, having heard about who would be on the show.
The series would end in the Driving Home for Christmas special, where they'd be Secret Santa and buy each other cars before driving from Bethlehem in Wales to the Top Gear test track. This was actually pretty good, very heartwarming. A bit too heartwarming, to be honest. It definitely lacked the edge and tension that the classic trio had. But all in all, still a nice watch. And the end was lovely. Well, as long as you stop before Shakin' Stevens starts singing. Actually, fuck that. I like Shakin' Stevens. I don't care who knows it. Would have been better if they could have got Chris Rea, but never mind. Maybe he was busy. While this episode had its good moments, on the whole, it was nothing special. And it seems like I wasn't the only one who shared those sentiments, as the special received a lot of criticism on Twitter, and the ratings fell from episode 5 at 6.30 million to 4.15 for the special. That's almost a third of the audience dropping off. What might not have helped was the fact the Grand Tour special earlier that month, Carnage of Trios, was so well received. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. In this oversaturated media landscape with endless amounts of content to watch, you might only have time for one motoring show. And if you had to pick, you're probably going to pick the Grand Tour, aren't you? And it seems like people did. Series 32 would see viewership decline even further, hovering between 3 and 4 million for the series, averaging out at 3.93 million viewers. Personally, I thought the series was good. Nothing special, but certainly competent. Cars were driven, jokes were told. I thought it was okay. But just okay. The HGV challenge was good. It had already been done before. They looked at cars from police shows, which was good, and then came up with their own modern day equivalent, which was great fun.
Do you know why I'm stopping you?
They've got a good idea, Angel.
Your back right tyre's down. I'm not going to write you a ticket this time.
Thank you.
But get yourself home, drive carefully and get it sorted. How's that?
But again, I mean, they hadn't really exactly done the same thing in the past, but they had multiple times done stuff that was quite similar. I tell you what I did love from this series, that was their American road trip, where they tried to find a motorsport that they were good at. This I really enjoyed. Series 32 was comprised of 5 episodes, and that seemed to be their new normal, as they would do the same again for Series 33. As for Series 33, it was fine. I was really struggling to get through it at this point, but it was okay, it wasn't bad. If I'm honest, at this point in the research, I was struggling to get through it, but still, it wasn't bad. It was fine. That's the best way I can describe it, really. It was daytime television with a prime time budget. Maybe that's a bit harsh. But it was so far gone from the spirit of what I loved about Top Gear. There was no edginess, no tension between the presenters, no rebellious spirit, no crude jokes, no inventive wacky creations, no Dunsfold aerodrome, no Starner Easily Priced car, no cool wall, no news segment, no audience interaction, and pretty much no Stig. Honestly, I can't remember him even being there at this point. Top Gear now was just 3 blokes who got on driving fast cars. It was now the kind of show you'd stick on in the background, not the kind of show that would compel you to make a 4-part series of videos about it, and would hopefully compel some people to like and subscribe to. Nevertheless, I've watched it, so I might as well talk about it. Series 33 saw them go on a road trip to Thailand in pickup trucks. This was pretty good. They did a road trip in supercars in Germany. It was fine. Again, they've sort of done the same thing in the past, but never mind. They tested some small cars in France. Freddie did some stock car racing. It was fine. We got a film about some youngsters with some spanners getting into racing and all that. And this was enough to get the show renewed for another series. Series 34 started filming in November 2022, while Series 33 was still going out. This series would again be comprised of 5 episodes, and according to a subsequent interview that he had with Yahoo UK, Tiff Needell was set to return in a throwback segment with Chris Coffey and Angela Rippon, as they would be representing the 90s, the 80s and the 70s. Still missing out the geezers we all want to see, but still, this does sound class. There was also going to be a segment filmed at the Nürburgring, my goodness that word's come up a lot, which is believed to be a tribute to Sabine Schmitz, which also would have been really nice to see. In addition to all of that, there was speculation that they were filming a North Africa special, after Paddy McGuinness and Claire Pizzey had posted pictures of them filming in Morocco. However, it was a shoot that took place on the 13th of December 2022 that ultimately laid waste to all of those plans.
3 months before the accident, I'd gone to the BBC and said, unless you change something, someone's going to die on this show. So I went to them. I went to the BBC and I told them of my concerns from what I'd seen. As the most experienced driver on the show by a mile, I said, if we carry on, at the very least we're going to have a serious injury, at the very worst we're going to have a fatality.
The call time for that day was late, and due to the scheduling, Chris Harris didn't have time to talk with Freddie Flintoff and give him advice on what he could expect from the car that he'd be driving, which was something he would always do on shoots.
That day at Dunsfold, that was a shoot that was rushed for me. That was, and I know that was a we need to use this day shoot. That's another one that's another red flag for me. We've got a day at a track, we need to fill it. Well, you've reverse engineered that, you know?
Right.
Your priorities are already to fill something up.
There at the track that day, only 2 people had driven the car before, and neither of them were consulted on how to handle it. To make things worse, the car that Freddie would be driving was the Morgan Super Free Trike, which had a top speed of 130 miles per hour. The selection of this vehicle was apparently a last-minute decision. This vehicle is believed to be very hard to drive, with Chris Harris showing some concern about it.
If you establish really big stunts that have big vision and are ambitious, they tend to come with them a level of rigour that means they are executed well. The difficult area is the kind of just being at a test track with a smaller crew and someone says, give that a go. That's when it goes wrong. Because no one's really thought about it. They're saying, well, we've done the risk assessment, but just give that a go while you're here.
Reports are conflicted on whether or not Freddie was wearing a helmet, but we know the car had no roof and no airbag. Reportedly, Freddie was apprehensive about driving this vehicle. Freddie was reportedly accompanied by a crew member in the passenger seat, and early reports suggest that Freddie was going 130 miles per hour. However, it has subsequently been reported that it was just 22 miles per hour. Chris Harris, meanwhile, was sitting in a room in Dunsfold when he got a message coming through his radio. Freddie had crashed, with the Morgan three-wheeler flipping over in the process. It was at this moment we may have seen the last of Freddie Flintoff.
So I ran to the window, looked out, and he wasn't moving, so I thought he was dead.
I was tempted to play a certain Curtis Mayfield song here, but thought it'd be bad taste. Reports have stated that there wasn't a stretcher on site for Freddie and that he had to wait 45 minutes to get airlifted as there wasn't an air ambulance on site. Some have attributed this to BBC cost cutting. Freddie suffered broken ribs, injuries to his jaw and severe, lifelong facial injuries. Admittedly, he was still a lot more handsome than me. The bastard. However, the psychological impact on Freddie was arguably even worse, as he suffered from intense PTSD and didn't want to leave his house for a year. I've got no idea what happened to the other crew member in the car, by the way. No one's written much about that. What's going on? What's happening? Hope you're alright, mate. Needless to say, Freddie would be in no condition to work on Top Gear. If there was ever an excuse to call in sick, this would be it. Once again, like so many times before, the future of the show had been plunged into uncertainty. Once again, like so many times before, the future of Top Gear had been plunged into uncertainty. However, they still had one more show in the can. Due to the World Cup, the final episode of Series 33 had been pre-recorded, and its air date delayed until the 18th of December, as 3.59 million viewers tuned in to watch what was to be the last episode of Top Gear. The episode itself was fine, it was alright. See, that's why I prefer cat geezers. On the 26th of January 2023, it was reported that Freddie Flintoff was putting his TV career on hold, as his family begged him to quit the show. On the 24th of March the following year, the BBC announced the production of Top Gear would be halted, saying under the circumstances we feel it would be inappropriate to resume making Series 34. Yeah, inappropriate is one word for it.
They just sort of left me to sweat, really. I just sat in where I live and drank whiskey. I didn't have much contact with them at all. Everything went quiet.
March would also be when the BBC Studios' internal investigation into the accident was wrapped up. A spokesperson for the Health and Safety Executive, HSE, said we've completed our inquiries into this incident and we will not be investigating further. An independent investigation into the incident was also carried out, and it found the show had complied with industry best practice. But there were learnings that would need to be rigorously applied if Top Gear returned. As for Freddie Flintoff, he would reach a £9 million settlement with the BBC Studios. And you know what, he is looking a lot better. Glad to see you doing well, Freddie. Still very bangable, if I was. On the 21st of November 2023, the BBC announced it would rest Top Gear, and it would not return for the foreseeable future.
The UK show is being shelved. The word rested is the official phrase. But the original Stig who worked with Clarkson and Co in the noughties thinks the programme may be facing more than just a little lie down.
I personally don't think it's a little rest. I think the programme's been laid to rest. I think that there's no appetite from certain quarters inside the BBC to continue with the show.
This news was met by the protests of millions of the show's adoring fans who, no it wasn't, no one gave a shit. This information seemed to be more of a confirmation of the inevitable than actual news. So yeah, just like that, it's over. Top Gear's done. After an almost uninterrupted run of 45 years on British television, Top Gear is no more. Kurt Cobain and Neil Young once said it's better to burn out than it is to fade away. Top Gear somehow managed to do both. Well, I say Kurt Cobain said it, he wrote it down because, Anyway, moving on. While the brand Top Gear still lives on in the form of a website, magazine, multiple international remakes, the essence of Top Gear, that had died a long time ago. If anything, this part 4 has been more of a post-mortem than anything else, as it hung in there a lot longer than I expected anyone thought it would do. But although we didn't know how it was going to get there, I think we all knew the outcome of the show. While it still had its good moments, this titan of pop culture had steadily been running out of gas for almost a decade. So when the time came for it to be laid to rest, I don't think anyone was surprised, or gave a fuck. And now it was time for this show to be laid to rest. Over the years, Top Gear accumulated enough baggage to sink any show many times over. However, the fact remains, Top Gear wasn't any show, and in the future, whether or not there is still such a thing as television, there is still such a thing as cars, whether or not the world still spins, I doubt we'll ever see any show quite like it again. You could call Top Gear revolutionary, outdated, enlightening, offensive, irresponsible, educational, outrageous, spectacular, overindulgent, heartwarming. But if I had to choose just one word to remember it by, That would be fun.